Hi, this is Michael Neuenschwander with Outlook Wealth Advisors. Thank you for joining us for our second part of our video where we've been talking about retirement realities. So today we'll cover number 4 through 6, but if you'd like to catch the first 3, be sure to check out our prior video. But let's go ahead and get into it. So we talk about retirement realities. Number 4. Well, the truth is a lot of people work longer than they may need to. So what do I mean by that? It says, when we put together a plan and run through numbers, for many people, it says, yeah, you can afford to retire at 65, whatever that date may be for you. Here's the kind of money you could be able to have in retirement based on various sources of Social Security, if you're fortunate enough to have a pension, retirement assets, dividends, and so forth. However, some people, even though we've run all the numbers, we've run through all the different scenarios and what ifs, sometimes pulling that string, so to speak, really pulling the ripcord on retirement is a little bit more than simply just a financial decision. For a lot of people, working throughout your career was more than just a paycheck. It was part of your identity. It was part of your social interaction, part of your purpose for getting up and doing things every day. So we have to understand that the reality is, all of those other reasons you went to work didn't just disappear, overnight. You need to find a purpose of what are you retiring to, not just what are you retiring from. I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, in doing this for 20 years, you've had a few people where I've had unfortunately seen the instance where they retired simply because they were tired of working. They didn't like what they were doing. They were burnt out on it. But they didn't retire towards a hobby, towards time with family, towards anything else that gave them purpose. And unfortunately, that either ends up being scenarios where I'm sure you've had people where they retired and their health took a nosedive. Now, not to say that purpose and health are 100% related, but I think we've all seen those instances where people work, they retire, and then unfortunately they're not around 5 years, 10 years down the road. Or the other side of things that we often see is if your version of retirement is simply, I'm going to entertain myself by spending more money. Well, that can be a tough retirement reality too, because if you immediately begin going over budget, over what you had planned to spend in retirement, that's a recipe for disaster in the long run. So it's simply recognizing that you need to have a purpose, a goal, things that become more important in your life than continuing to work, and that gives you something to retire to so you can ultimately really enjoy your retirement. So now let's jump into the uncomfortable retirement reality number 5. And this is another one of those truths that people love feeling like they're in control. And it says, while we can do some planning and we can try to take away some uncertainty, the reality is there's a whole lot in life that we can't control. We can't control what the market is going to do. As we shared in our prior video, if there's a financial advisor who tries to tell you they can control the market or predict the market, that's usually more of a red flag. But we can't control the market. We can't control health. We can't control other people, when it comes to your retirement. So unfortunately, some of that uncertainty leaves people clinging on to things that they maybe think they can control. And sometimes that actually leads to bad decisions. What do I mean by that? It says, well, if the market has a bad week, it's well, I can control if I'm in the market or not, so let me sell out of the market. Yet time and time again, when we look historically, panicking and selling out of the market is almost always a mistake. And so sometimes that feeling of being in control leads us to make some bad decisions. So when you take all these kind of various things of, what you think you can control, what you'd like to control, sometimes that puts you on a fool's errand, so to speak. And so while that may be a little bit unsettling, it's the other, John Wooden quote, control the controllables, or said another way, accept the things you can't control. So unfortunately, that becomes a difficult reality for some people in retirement, but this is where at least having a plan and understanding what are some of the potential outcomes. Things aren't always going to go exactly according to plan, but if hey, if we were shooting for a certain rate of return and we don't quite get there because the market was off, well, you can understand, well, here's the repercussion of that, and how do we potentially make up a little bit for it? But in understanding simply that we have to get a little comfortable with being uncomfortable. So let's go to our next retirement reality. So retirement reality number 6. We talk about being uncomfortable. It says, okay, bear with me for a minute. Don't roll your eyes here, but let's see. The truth is there are certain things, and you feel free to jump in on the comments here, but there are certain things when you look and you're heading into and you've planned for retirement that you simply aren't necessarily the expert, in. What I mean by that is whether you were an engineer, whether you were a teacher, whatever your area of expertise, you were trained in those areas, you have experience in those areas, and you became an expert in that area. But as you get into retirement, the idea of sometimes understanding what got you here is not going to be the same thing that gets you to the finish line, so to speak, meaning the things you did prior to retirement in many cases are actually bad things or bad advice to do while you're in retirement. So if we keep it simple, let's just look at the investment side for a moment and says, when you're saving for retirement, your number one goal, I just need to set money aside and I need it to grow. If I'm 10, 15, 20 years out from retirement, I don't need to be too worried about short-term risk. I don't need to be too worried about what kind of income it generates. I don't need to worry about how long it's going to last or a distribution plan. However, as soon as you flip the switch and now you're retired and you're relying on that nest egg to be there for your income for the rest of your life, well, now how much risk it takes, how much of a drawdown it may suffer during a bad market is critically important. How much income it generates, is it going to last your lifetime? So all those things you didn't necessarily have to worry about before retirement become front and center, in retirement. Same can be said. We have other videos where we've touched on some of the myths and the truths about Social Security. Well, becoming an expert and making the right decision on Social Security is another big part of it. Taxes as well. Being a CPA, we dive into taxes in quite a bit of detail. However, the same kind of tax issues you faced prior to retirement are much different in retirement. When it comes to taxation of Social Security, things like IRMA, where you pay more for Medicare based on your income, and simply what tax bracket you're in now, and do things like Roth conversions or moving money around make sense. So while I have no doubt that most people, if you wanted to dedicate your retirement to learning those things, staying on top of every change, I have no doubt that most people are capable of doing that. But the biggest question for a lot of you is that what you want to be doing in retirement? Do you want to spend the hours staying on top of things, not just investments, taxes, Medicare, healthcare law, everything else that goes into it, as well as the investments? So in many cases, this is where a financial advisor adds benefit. Now, I'm not saying you need to go work with Outlook Wealth Advisors, but even Vanguard did a big study that says, what is the value of working with a financial advisor? And there can be some value purely on the investments. There's certainly value when it comes to a distribution plan of which are the best assets to use and when. There's certainly benefit from having a tax strategy to mitigate long-term taxes, but one of the biggest things that a financial advisor can actually add is some accountability, meaning there's a plan and the ability to make sure that the plan is being followed. Otherwise, it may all be up to you. And you may be sitting here and saying, no problem, Michael, I can handle that. I enjoy this stuff. And you may be fully capable of doing so. But one of the things we always have to double check is if you're married, it's not just you have to be concerned with. If you're handling everything, what happens if it gets to the point where either you can't or you're not there? Does your spouse, does your family have somebody else who knows what the plan is and can help make sure that that plan is followed so that things don't get off track, things don't fall apart? So as we summarize this retirement reality number 6, and it's simply just an understanding that the things that got you to retirement may not necessarily be the things that really get you through retirement. And in many cases, while you may be capable of learning certain things and certainly are able to potentially even become an expert, If that's not your ideal and dream of retirement, in many cases, this is where adding an advisor, having an advisor can be a huge benefit to you and more than pays for themselves in terms of the benefits they add, not just from investments, tax strategy, distribution strategy, but frankly also the accountability of making sure that a plan is in place and a plan is followed. And so while we may think it's critical that people reach out or work with an advisor in these areas, whether it's us, we'd be happy to visit with you, or whether it's someone else, I think the bigger thing to think about is there value in having an advisor or a second set of eyes to help co-pilot through your retirement? So if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to hit subscribe below. If you didn't catch the earlier part where we covered the 3 other retirement realities, be sure to watch our prior video. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of the day.